doing that. But soon we'll be back at the law school in the event center, and hopefully we'll have our many breakfasts there as we did in the past. So welcome everybody. We'll begin in just about 10 seconds. Thank you all for coming. We will begin in just another second or two. Well, thank you, everybody. Good morning. On behalf of New York Law School and Dean Anthony Crowell, I welcome you to the 175th City Law Breakfast, a series that began in 1994. I am Ross Sandler, Professor of Law and the Director of the Center for New York City Law. Thank you for attending and helping to make these City Law Breakfasts such an important public forum. I want to thank our three generous and loyal founding sponsors of these City Law Breakfasts who've been with us from the beginning. They are Consolidated Edison, Verizon, and the law firm of Greenberg Traurig. Thank you. I also want to thank the attendees who voluntarily contribute when they sign up to attend the breakfast. The names of these individual contributors, we call Gold Star contributors, are listed in the email sent after every breakfast with the link to the video. We are enormously grateful for these contributors that make our breakfast possible. After Georgia Pestana's prepared remarks, we will have a question and comment session. You may submit a question or a comment at any time during the breakfast. We will collect them as they come in. To submit a question or comment, please use the Q&A function on your Zoom screen. And please identify yourself with your first and last name and your organization. Following the questions and comments, we will invite Dean Anthony Crowell and Michael Pastor to join Georgia Pestana with a conversation. First, we are delighted to welcome Corporation Counsel Georgia Pestana to our City Law Breakfast series. Georgia Pestana is the first woman and first Latina to serve as Corporation Counsel. She grew up in West New York, New Jersey, graduated from Barnard College and from NYU Law School. After graduation, she went to work for the law department. In her 30-year, pardon me, in her 33-year career at the law department, she rose to be managing attorney of the General Litigation Division, chief of the Labor and Employment Law Division, executive assistant Corporation Counsel for Employment and Policy Litigation, and in 2015, first assistant Corporation Counsel. On July 29th of this year, following the new charter requirement, Georgia Pestana was confirmed by the City Council and as the Corporation Counsel. Zach Carter, former Corporation Counsel and who spoke at these breakfasts, in applauding her confirmation, said that Georgia Pestana is the first Corporation Counsel in modern history to be drawn from the ranks of the law department. And with that long tenure, she brings unprecedented knowledge and experience to the job. She also brings the friendship, good feelings, and support of her many friends and colleagues at the law department. We are delighted to welcome Georgia Pestana to the City Law Breakfast series. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Professor Sandler, for inviting me to speak and for that kind introduction. I'm honored to be speaking with all of you today. This breakfast is a rite of passage for each Corporation Counsel, and I would not dream of breaking the streak. The number of people zooming into this talk today is evidence that it's not the free breakfasts that draw these crowds year after year. The Center for New York City Law performs a real public service. Your presentation of speakers that promote discussion about issues that affect New Yorkers is invaluable. I commend the entire team responsible for these informative events. As a lot has been written and said about practicing law during a pandemic, the perspective of a government law office grappling with the myriad issues of running the city in an unprecedented time is unique. The work of our 1,700 staff in 20 locations across the boroughs touches upon nearly every aspect of life in the city. Everyone was called upon to navigate the strange world we suddenly found ourselves thrust into. Setting up a huge law office to work remotely with literally no notice had enormous complexities. Doing so when simultaneously providing legal advice and facilitating the continued delivery of city services in a traumatized city was immensely challenging. The law department has historically been at the center of helping to guide the city through crises. During the fiscal crises of the late 1970s, Ed Koch said two agencies, the law department and OMB, were on the front lines protecting the city from descending into bankruptcy. We have remained on the front lines, providing advice through subsequent crises. Our advice and other work was crucial to the rebuilding and rebounding after the attacks on 9/11. And of course, we pitched in again to help address the devastating impact of Superstorm Sandy. Every crisis tests the city in different ways. The pandemic presented new challenges and took a dreadful toll on our residents. But as with other times of crisis, New Yorkers pulled together and our city workers found ways to deliver services and to protect our residents through these difficulties. We learned again that we're all in this together. No one leader, no agency or community alone could have addressed this complex challenges presented by the virus. During the first critical days and for more than a dozen months into the pandemic, our former Corporation Counsel, Jim Johnson, led our agency with wisdom, intelligence, and compassion. We still rely on a number of programs he put in place to improve problem solving, innovation, and communication across agencies and among our staff. Jim and I shared the vision of emerging stronger as a government law office following this difficult time. While we can't predict the next crisis, this has been an opportunity to learn how to be better prepared on all fronts and how to position ourselves for recovery. As you heard Professor Sandler say, I've been associated with a number of firsts. First woman and first Latina to lead the law department, the first person to become corporation counsel who progressed through the ranks of the department, and also the first corporation counsel to be confirmed by the city council because of the change in the charter. During my tenure as first assistant and now as corporation counsel, the city has been confronted with a crisis that itself had many firsts. Our police officers, correction officers, firefighters, sanitation workers, and of course EMS and our other healthcare workers and first responders put in long days in person in a city that was by turns chaotic or eerily quiet, frightening or heartbreakingly sad. At the same time, other city workers experienced being propelled into working from home for the first time. Does everybody remember how we initially thought it would be for a few days, maybe a week or two? In those early days, we had no idea that we would still be working from home 18 months later, nor did we fully comprehend the devastating toll on human life and the impact on our psyches and our economy that COVID-19 would exact. Our staff figured out how to do their jobs remotely while dealing with the realization that things would never be normal again, and with emotional impacts, trauma, and loss of loved ones that COVID brought. In those early days, we sprung into action, figuring out how to get computers and other technology to our staff and to 1 million school children. And while the law department had previously advised on and drafted Commissioner of Health orders and mayoral executive orders and emergency orders, never before had we considered the proper scope of orders necessary to keep the people safe from a deadly virus that was quickly spreading through our communities. Procurement rules had to be waived in order to streamline the procurement process to enable the city to buy hundreds of millions of dollars of N95s and other protective gear for our first responders. Everyone else around the globe was trying to buy the same equipment. It was the first time we closed schools for the year for 1 million students and launched the largest remote public education program in the world. Adding to the challenges of keeping a city and a school system operating, the city and the country were going through a long overdue reckoning with the country's racial history, including significant unrest following a fatal police encounter in Minneapolis. And to top it off, we had a federal government that was providing no leadership in the fight against the pandemic and was unnecessarily antagonistic and working against the city's interests. Someone recently asked me what mindset was helpful in working through these issues with others at the law department and our city agencies. My answer is one I recall giving the city council during my confirmation hearing. Throughout it all, I called upon the guiding principle that I learned my first day at the law department 33 years ago. What's most important is achieving the right result for the city and its residents. I can say that this goal is shared by our dedicated staff at the law department. They represent an exceptional level of institutional knowledge and legal experience, and they understand the unique responsibilities and obligations of furthering the best interest of the city. At the start of the pandemic, our attorneys dealt with a flood of legal issues from the mayor's office and agencies. Unique issues were raised about continuing government operations, food delivery to the elderly and the homebound, price gouging, medical privacy, numerous First Amendment issues, and questions connected to the unthinkable, makeshift morgues. We quickly assembled a team of cross-disciplinary experts from across our divisions and an executive staff to address these issues and coordinate our responses for consistency. Long days were spent glued to computer screens and cell phones with many cups of hot tea to soothe hoarse voices carrying us through. As the words community spread became a common phrase, our team provided the legal guidance to establish the critical test and trace operation. As the state issued executive orders on gatherings, travel, and social distancing, we figured out how these orders could best be legally enforced in the city, and we defended against many legal challenges to the mayor and the governor's executive orders. As the city sought to ensure a ready supply of vital PPE, secure hotel rooms for individuals who had to quarantine away from family members, and rapidly expand its telehealth program, our transactional lawyers worked around the clock. These are just a few examples of the issues that arose every day that needed expedited resolution. Although I never knew what the day would bring, I knew we had the right people in place to address an evolving crisis. Staff adapted quickly and never wavered in their commitment to excellence for the city. Through it all, our support professionals also played a critical role in ensuring the continued operations of our agency, with many coming into our office locations throughout the crisis. Others volunteered to help the city by distributing masks and educating the public about mask wearing, packing and distributing food for families in need, and taking on other important volunteer opportunities. Another group of people has been very helpful in our work during the crisis. The various agency general counsels played a critical role, and our regular communications with them were integral to the city's overall response. Each agency has a different mission and raises new and different problems for us to analyze. Listening is key. Agencies know their business and the facts and the legal problems up close. The knowledge and the experience the law department gains from working with a wide variety of agencies on a multitude of problems allows us to offer a broader perspective and aid in problem solving. Early in the pandemic, the law department began hosting weekly calls with agency counsel to keep everyone up to date on legal developments and share tips and ideas for keeping up with the work while staff was scattered and working remotely. Approaches and answers to problems that developed during those meetings were helpful to us all. It's a great partnership that continues with bi-weekly, now we're on teams, that are now more focused on return to office and implementing masking, testing, and vaccine mandates. There's a real value in bringing everyone together to give a sense of support, share collective experience, and learn from the issues raised by different agencies. In the late spring of 2020, there were glimmers of a new normal on the horizon as infection rates decreased and some closure orders were lifted. More and more businesses and activities opened back up as we progressed through the state's phased reopening. This new reality brought a fresh set of challenges. COVID was still a looming threat, but pandemic restrictions had deprived us of many things we now wanted back, and we needed to figure out how to get back together safely, how to balance public safety with other constitutional rights. Public gathering restrictions limited some constitutionally protected events, such as protests and religious gatherings, which led to legal challenges. In late May 2020, Governor Cuomo permitted small religious gatherings to resume statewide, while other gatherings remained prohibited. The next day, the New York Civil Liberties Union sued the state and the city, arguing that it was unconstitutional to deny protesters the right to gather, but allow gatherings for religious reasons. In response, Governor Cuomo changed course to allow groups of up to 10 people to meet for any reason. Then, a week or two later, on May 25th, 2020, George Floyd was murdered. The ensuing protests and rallies brought new challenges. Among them, religious institutions now argued that they should be allowed to gather in groups larger than 10, since large public demonstrations were allowed following the death of George Floyd. Challenges to gathering bans quickly multiplied around the country. The New York Law Journal reported at the time that about 40 lawsuits were pending by churches and other religious groups. The Supreme Court even weighed in on a challenge to California's strict limits on places of worship. The law department at the time, Jim and I were meeting with our counterparts around the country through the International Municipal Lawyers Association, gathered us together periodically to share notes and brainstorm solutions. That was also invaluable partnership. The First Amendment litigation could almost be considered a quaint walk in the park against the backdrop of everything else that was happening. Summer protests were a flashpoint for the city and the country, made worse by the trauma of the pandemic. The protests and demonstrations were initially peaceful, but interactions between protesters and police began to escalate and resulted in well-publicized incidents and the arrest of over 1,000 individuals. The need for a citywide curfew became urgent, and the mayor announced one. Shortly thereafter, it was challenged as an unconstitutional deprivation of New Yorkers' freedom of movement, freedom of speech, and liberty. We ultimately prevailed on the curfew lawsuit, but lawsuits brought by protesters alleging misconduct by some officers remain pending. The events of that summer accelerated a local and national conversation on police reform and what should be accomplished through legislative and policy changes. Reports published after investigations into the protests led to reforms that are currently being implemented. Advocates who had fought for police reform for years welcomed the enhanced political support needed to achieve municipal change. The moment resulted in the repeal of Civil Rights Law 50A, which had shielded police disciplinary records from public disclosure. That itself prompted several legal challenges. The city continued to face challenges through the summer of 2020, this time from another front, the federal government. As the city faced a significant economic crisis with budget cuts, hiring freezes, and furloughs, we found ourselves fighting the federal government to secure much-needed funds. In September 2020, President Trump ordered the Justice Department to withhold federal funds from anarchist jurisdictions that deteriorated into lawless zones and pointed to New York, Portland, and Seattle as among the cities he had in mind. We drafted and filed a complaint joined by Seattle and Portland, arguing that the denial of grants and funds would be unconstitutional and politically motivated. Thankfully, before damage could be done, President Biden revoked the order and we were able to withdraw our lawsuit. But we still had to fight the federal government for funding during a crisis that was severely stretching our resources and taking a toll in many other ways. I am proud that we prevailed in our case to restore federal pandemic aid to public schools, and that we provided assistance when the federal administration changed so that New York City could get financial assistance we needed so that we could continue to provide necessary services and programs and ensure that we had steady supply of vaccines when those became available. We've made a lot of progress on the road to recovery, and while there is a lot to be hopeful about, there's still a lot of work to be done and challenges to face. From the beginning, scientists and public health experts stressed that vaccines would be the linchpin to any solution. Fortunately, during the darkest days of winter surge last year, worldwide collaboration between industry and government led to 3 safe and effective vaccines. However, in a divided and political climate, it was not easy to mobilize and persuade 8 million New Yorkers to take a life-saving vaccine. But the city has done remarkable work. In the first few months of 2021, millions of doses were administered in the city. The pace of vaccinations eventually slowed despite plentiful supply. The city needed to pursue policies to get more people vaccinated so we could put the threat of mass hospitalizations and deaths as a result of COVID behind us. First, the city sought to incentivize greater vaccination by making the city more hospitable to those who are vaccinated. Since September, under the Key to NYC program, the city has directed that only vaccinated individuals may work in and patronize indoor social, entertainment, and recreational settings. The data showed us that the young adults, a slice of the population that frequents many indoor establishments, had some of the lowest vaccination rates in the city. At the time, survey results showed that many of these young adults would be motivated to get vaccinated if their ability to resume a social life hinged on getting jabbed. Well, within a month, the policy showed demonstrable effects. The overall vaccination rate in the city increased 9%, while the rate among 18 to 34-year-olds, our target group, increased 13%. This policy has helped keep COVID cases down while restoring a sense of normalcy to much of the city. While the program faces ongoing lawsuits raising different challenges, the courts have generally sided with the city, and for good reason. The program doesn't run afoul of the Constitution because it simply places reasonable, common sense restrictions on those who choose not to get vaccinated. At the same time, the program is rationally related to the city's important public health objectives. First, to curtail the number of COVID cases by limiting the ability of unvaccinated individuals to spread or contract the disease. And second, to ensure that the city's healthcare system will not be overwhelmed by yet another wave of cases. In addition to acting through the private sector, the city also worked to increase the city's vaccination rate through its public workforce and certain city contractors. While vaccines were still under emergency use authorization, the city required its workers and those of certain contractors to either show proof of vaccination or submit to weekly tests. With the return to fully open schools and municipal offices in the fall, the city was committed to ensuring a safe environment for in-person activities. As the regulatory landscape changed, so did the city's policies. In August, when the vaccines received full regulatory approval for use in adults, the Commissioner of Health ordered public school employees to receive the vaccination. Weeks later, the vaccine mandate was expanded to all municipal employees. The vaccine mandates for the city's employees have been a success. Because of the mandate, 96% of all full-time school employees have received at least one dose of the vaccine, including 99% of principals, 96% of teachers, and 94% of other staff. For the city workforce overall, as of yesterday, 93% had been vaccinated. While the vaccine mandates have also sparked ongoing litigation, the courts, again, have generally sided with the city. Last month, the U.S. Supreme Court refused to block the vaccine mandate for school employees. This month, the Second Department refused to block the broader mandate against city employees. Courts have upheld vaccination requirements in the face of constitutional challenges for well over a century. While cases against the mandates are ongoing, we are confident that the U.S. and New York state constitutions allow a government employer to condition public employment on being vaccinated against a deadly virus. With the high vaccination rates and low COVID positivity rates we see today, it's easy to forget that a year ago, many were quick to write off the city. Millions of tourists had disappeared. Workers across industries had abruptly lost their jobs or had to work from home. Broadway and scores of small businesses in every neighborhood were shuttered. We've made remarkable progress since then. With the key to NYC program in place, New Yorkers are back in stadiums, music halls, theaters, restaurants, and bars. This year, we saw the return of the US Open, Comic-Con, the New York City Marathon, the Halloween Parade, and coming up next, the Thanksgiving Day Parade. With the public employee vaccine mandate, teachers and children are back in the classrooms. Our workforce feels safer in our offices, and members of the public who come into contact with city employees can also feel safer. The Office of the Corporation Counsel, as it always has, is continuing to do its part to forge a new way forward. We're institutionalizing our current thinking about emergency planning and management and continue to improve on the stronger communication among city agencies. We've been presented with numerous opportunities to enhance communications and relationships with the broader legal and municipal community to improve our work on behalf of the public. Much of that work is invisible, but the law department undertakes it nonetheless. Crisis tests us individually and collectively. Each crisis brings different and unique problems to solve. We can't predict the exact nature of the next crisis, but there will be one, and we need to be prepared. For the law department, the pandemic has underscored the importance of our ability to adapt to new challenges and new ways of doing things, no matter how uncomfortable at first. Also, that our successes depend largely on how well we work together, both internally and intergovernmentally. We need compassion for one another. We're all in this together. It also showed that, especially during tumultuous and politically divided times, we must never lose sight of our mission to protect the interests of the client, the city of New York, and to try to improve the lives of all New Yorkers. On a personal level, it's been an honor to serve the city at this critical time. I am proud of all the work my office has done to help the city navigate one of its toughest crises and to help the city continue to fulfill the great and continuing promise it holds for so many people. Thank you all. I look forward to your questions.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for the review of where we are and where we've been. I don't think I see any questions, but let me just say first, that you can submit a question or a comment on the through the Q&A function, and then we'll be able to continue with that part of it. While we're waiting, I want to thank Lillian Valley Santiago and the staff of the Center for New York City Law and the staff of the law school for their terrific work in putting together these breakfasts. Let me ask a question as questions may come in. What are the work rules at the law department these days? Is everybody coming in 5 days a week?
Yes, since September 14th, the city workforce has been coming in to work 5 days a week, or some, work more hours than that. But at the law department, we're technically a 5 day a week operation, but sometimes we work weekends.
Well, that I understand that very well. Let's go to Brian Kasuba. Are there any questions, Brian?
Yes, thank you, Ross. We have a couple questions coming in, and please keep them coming. First question is from Joseph Cardillo. The practical effect of the city's handling of the First Amendment litigation was that protests for Black Lives Matter were permitted while any other gathering, anti-mask curfew protests, large religious gatherings were prohibited. How does the city's law firm reconcile this disparate impact on free speech that is suppressing permitting speech based upon explicitity on content of speech?
The city did not make a choice on the content of speech. The protests and the demonstrations after the George Floyd murder were continuing events across the country, and adjustments were made on the gatherings restrictions that the state had imposed as time went on and it became safer. It's also required that, and many protesters complied with mask wearing during the protests.
Okay, great. Our next question is from Michelle Huey. Good morning, Ms. Pestana. Congratulations on your well-earned appointment. Speaking of crises, earlier this year, the Corp Council's computers were hacked. How long was the city offline and how much work time was lost?
There was an unfortunate breach into our system. We were offline for a weekend and not back up fully for a few days afterwards. We took the opportunity to overhaul our entire system, and I am proud. It's probably one of the most secure offices in the country right now.
Okay, we're still waiting for other questions to come in. Please don't be shy, people. Submit questions. I'll ask a question to see if we have more. So we have a lot of law students online today who are interested in government service and counsel service. What advice do you have for students who are interested in practicing government law?
I think that you should try it out. As a law student, we have the summer honors program, and I know our agencies also have internships and externships that are available. So if you think you're interested in being a government lawyer, please try to speak to your career services office and connect up with our recruitment as well as with agencies if you're particularly interested in an area of the law that they practice in. The general counsel's offices could always also use help.
We have a question coming in from David Varelli. What have you found to be the biggest difference between being the first assistant corp counsel and corp counsel? And second, what advice can you give the, similar to what we talked about already. All right, we'll start with there. What the biggest difference between first assistant corp counsel and corp counsel?
So I was first assistant under Zach Carter and Jim Johnson, and we had a great working relationship. I worked side by side with them on a lot of the legal issues and took a hand in litigation, which is what I love. But I find that the biggest difference is there's nobody to bump the question to. The buck stops with me. So if there's like a decision that needs to be made, it's mine. And that is a little daunting, but I make those decisions every day, multiple times a day.
We don't see any further questions at the moment.
Let me-
So
I'd like to ask a question. One of the first speakers back in 1995, maybe, was Eva Spivak, who was legendary at the law department and a wonderful, wonderful woman and superb lawyer. And she described what she went through. And when she first went to the law department, how difficult it was and how difficult it was for a woman in those days. I wonder if you could speak to your experience and what it is today.
I have very warm memories of Edith. She tended to take many of our women lawyers under her wing and counsel and just check in on us. So Edith was a terrific lawyer and a wonderful person. So the law department now is very different from the law department Edith entered. More than half of our division chiefs are women, and more than half of our legal staff and support professionals are women. So there are women in positions of authority and power throughout. It's a pretty, I think, close network, but of everyone here. So it's while I'm not saying all challenges have been resolved, I do think that enormous progress has been made since the time that Edith was here. We have also a few committees that are focused on work-life balance, and as well as issues that are not just of interest to women now, but our interest to our entire office, and just making sure that we are leading healthy, balanced lives. So that those are among the changes that have occurred since Edith entered the law department.
okay, we have a handful of questions that came in. Next question is from Ron Richter. Thank you for your extraordinary service to New York City. The country's child welfare system is under great scrutiny with respect to government intervention in family life, specifically with respect to removal of children and surveillance of children. How, if at all, have you seen the law department role change with respect to counseling ACS in terms of this highly sensitive government function?
I think that I'm not going to share how I counsel my clients, but I think that the country has seen a major shift in the last 10, 20 years. And the ACS, like other agencies who are primarily interested in making sure children are safe, are less likely to remove a child unless there is very strong evidence that it is necessary for the safety of the child. And of course, there are court proceedings that have to happen very quickly afterwards when there's an emergency procedure, so removal. So there are procedures in place to protect the integrity of the family, but I also know that that is really considered the last resort.
Next question is from David Bally. What does the new mayoral administration coming in mean for the present law department?
I don't know. I mean, the new mayoral administration, it will make decisions, and the law department will adapt. We always do, and we always have the city as our client. Remember, one of the reasons that the charter was changed to have the council confirm the corporation counsel is that we are counsel to the city, which includes the mayoral administration and all the other elected officials as well, including the council, the controller, the public advocate, the borough presidents. So that is, we take our responsibility to all our clients very seriously, and we will adapt to the new administration. The council is also turning over significantly in this time.
Next question is from Leonard Wasserman. How frequently do you consult with City Hall on legal policy issues? Do you have a particular individual that you ask such questions of?
We are in constant communication with City Hall on all policy initiatives. That's been true of every administration. When there is a new policy or a new initiative that's being undertaken, it needs to be vetted. and make sure that it is legally sound. So me and members of my executive staff, depending on their area of expertise, will talk to the City Hall and help shape those policies to try to ensure that they are legally sound.
Next question is from Mark Diller. So great that we found a Corp counsel from within the law department. Can you speak to the characteristics of young and not so young lawyers sought by the law department, especially given the challenges of opposing private clients with significant resources?
You have to be brave. We are often up against private firms that have more better resources. Sometimes not. We litigate against solo practitioners who are also the only person at counsel table when we're in court. But it's not easy being a city lawyer. You're often seen as obstructionist or not prepared, when in fact you are prepared. You're just not saying what people would like you to say. So it's strength. Good on your feet. Even this is true even for the transactional divisions. Our procurement and legal counsel divisions also have to be able to think quickly and adapt and come up with solutions. So quick thinker, bravery, and creative thinker willing to collaborate. Those are the ones that come to mind immediately.
Next question is from Deborah. You've been at the law department for many years. How has the practice of law changed during that time, and do you see it changing in the future?
Well, so when I started, we didn't have computers. I know it's hard for many of the law students to believe, but and we had typing pools, and you hand wrote your briefs on a legal pad and submitted it for typing. So it better be right the first time, because getting it changed was going to be a challenge, and we were under the same sorts of deadlines then. So I think that now that we've all gotten more accustomed to editing on our computers, and we can make it perfect. But it also means that we spend more time editing and re-editing and trying to make things perfect, and that may not, you can always spend more time on a brief, you can always spend more time on an affidavit, but sometimes you just have to let it go. So I think that is the biggest way, just the technology that's now available to us, and the ability to do a deposition virtually, we've been appearing in court virtually for now, more than 2 years, it feels like. Maybe it's 18 months. So that's been the starkest change, but that's in recent times. I would say that the technology that's available, and also, we all have cell phones and are available now 24/7 to our clients, which, is good and bad.
Great. Next question is from Jeff Schembach. Has the law department figured out how to make agencies care about how what they do affects the judgments and claim funds 4 to 5 years from now?
I think that agencies do care. They don't want to harm people. They don't want to cause the city to get enjoined. So they are careful and thoughtful, but in any major corporation, and that's what the city of New York is, mistakes happen, and you can't protect against everything. So I don't agree with the suggestion that agencies don't care the impact that they'll have on judgment and claims. They do care.
Next question from Lisa Bova Hyatt. What do you think the greatest challenges for the new administration will face in 2022? The greatest challenge, I don't know. It's really the city's economy needs to be improved. We're still not where this great city could be, and with the opening of the
country's borders, we hope tourism will increase, and that definitely helps the city's bottom line. So with increased resources, we are able to dedicate more to the agencies and to provide excellent services that our residents need. So I do think it all starts with trying to increase the amount of revenue that we get from tourism and other areas in the city in order to continue to provide the city with residents with what they need.
Okay, great. So thank you all for your questions. We got to most of them. I'm now going to invite up Dean Anthony Crowell, Dean and President of New York Law School, and invite Michael Pastor, Director of the Tricarico Institute, to engage in a little conversation with the Corp Counsel. Thank you.
Good to see two old friends.
Indeed, it's really wonderful to host you in this forum. We invited Michael to join us today because not only is he someone who thinks of you as a mentor and your colleague, but he is our new director of the Tricarico Institute for the Business of Law and In-House Counsel. And we've decided at NYLS that in-house counsel must include the counsel and public service, public sector and public service law agencies who do critical work. And my goodness, the Municipal Corporation of New York is one such entity that there's a whole lot of in-house counsel work going on. So we're thrilled to have Michael and to welcome you. You know, Michael's one of these rock star alumni of the law department, and having recently served as general counsel at Do It before and the cyber command before coming here. Michael, you wanna ask one of the first questions? We know that creating lawyer leaders is a very big mission of the law department, and certainly something that we want to ensure that when we think about in-house counsel, that there's good mechanisms in place. So Michael, why don't you ask the first question?
Thank you, Dean, for having me, and I'm happy to jump into the first question, but I did want to say, since I haven't had a chance to do this publicly, you know, congratulations, Georgia, for someone like me who came through the ranks at the law department, you know, getting to work with you and seeing you help lead the organization for so many years. It's just really exciting, you know, to see someone come from within the ranks and now to take the top role. So on behalf of, I think I can speak for many alums and current law department staffers, you know, congratulations to you. So the first question I have, you know, the law department has always had a strong symbiotic relationship with agency counsel. Can you speak a little bit more in depth as to that, you know, the relationship and the role there, and what the public should know about, you know, how agency counsel works with the law department, and also, you know, what insight, you know, do they provide, whether it's about, you know, risk management or other things specific to their mandate? Can you talk a little bit more about the interaction between all the great agency counsel and their staff and the law department?
Yeah, the agency counsel are critical to the operations of the city. They know, the law department knows the laws, but agency counsel, because they specialize in particular areas of the law, they know it even better. So what the law department offers a lot of times is greater perspective. So we're a little bit removed from the nitty gritty, and we can share information and ideas and bat around potential solutions. But the relationship between the law department and its agency counsels is strong, and it always is well, we never like to lose people. It's always a happy thing when we have people leave the law department to go to be general counsel at an agency, because we know that a good person is going there and the tight connection between us stays strong. One thing that and I'm glad you mentioned risk management. One thing that we have implemented, we had started it right before COVID and then it slowed down, but it's now picking up again, is agency counsel teams. There are people here at the law department who work a lot with particular agencies, and their goal is to work more closely with general counsels and their staff to identify areas of risk and try to get ahead of it. since we are a little bit removed and we can see patterns when we get cases or issues come to us, if the feedback loop has been strengthened and with the agencies in order to try to improve the city's response to issues that we see could lead to litigation or have led to litigation, and improve whatever's causing it.
Great. Let me ask you this. So you spent your entire career at the law department. You've worked under many different leaders and have seen many different things up close. Now that you're in the top seat, what's the thing that surprised you the most? What have you discovered about managing the city and the city's legal operations that you didn't know?
To say what I didn't know, because I was first assistant for about 5 years. I know. You know, people are surprised that there's a bathroom nearby, but the Corporation Counsel is there. That wasn't what surprised me. I knew it was there. What surprised me is I always knew the breadth of the work that we do, but I have become more involved in areas that I used to not work with closely. You know, I'm a litigator, so I know the litigating divisions and that work well. I've learned more about our contracts and real estate division, our economic development division, the transactional divisions and their work. And it's as important and fascinating to me. So it's a whole new area of law that I can learn from, and that's exciting. Every day is different, and I learn something new every day.
What have you learned about yourself as a manager through all this, you know, the breadth of the mandate, but also there's a high degree, it's very personal as much as it is incredibly institutional.
I've learned, and maybe I knew this, I learned that the newer lawyers are really looking to this office for leadership and for feedback. And the more I reach out to them and make them understand that I'm a real human being, and have contacts with them, I also want them to think, hey, I can be in that office someday. I would hate to think that I'm the last person who comes up through the ranks. I hope I'm the first of many, because I think that I bring it's not just the institutional knowledge, but the experience of being, having seen a lot and experienced a lot of the city through a lot of different turns and twists. That is what makes me able to do this job differently than my predecessors, and I think uniquely enables me to address challenges as they come up. So I think that I want to, and I'm trying to be in closer contact with our newer attorneys to know what's on their mind and to help them develop as lawyers.
What do you think the expectations on you are a little different because you come from the inside? And is it, you know, what's the challenge of that?
No, it's funny. When I was during my confirmation hearing, or in anticipation of my confirmation hearing, I was told they're going to be tougher on you because you've been around such a long time. You've got to account for what the law department has done. So I do think that, you know, that the expectation is that I know things that my predecessors, who generally came from law firms, didn't know, and so I should be quicker with the answers, or be able to navigate some of the, you know, thornier things that we have to navigate, the conflicts among our agencies and our clients being the top one.
Yeah, there's you know, at times of stress and great change, having that institutional history, but also being so nimble as to being able to respond, because you know the personalities, you know how to manage. I have to think there's a great benefit to it, but I'd love to hear any insight you have on changes you've made that by virtue of being corporation counsel, you could make the decisions to do things that were hanging out there for periods of time that that you can make now because you're in the position and you have the clarity of thought and mandate?
Yeah, I do know the personalities, and so I know who the go-to people are on any particular subject, so I can be probably more nimble than my predecessors. But changes that came about, and I really did this when I was first assistant, is we appointed a chief ethics officer. So Michael Cardozo initially created the position. That was really part-time. It was done by Karen Griffin, who was still a lawyer in appeals. And then, slowly we realized there's a lot more work that needs to be done, that could be done, training. So that is a very important position that reports to me as Corporation Counsel that we put in place. Other decisions that I have made that structural changes. We created the impact litigation unit to bring more affirmative lawsuits against evildoers. And that is still, it's brought quite a few lawsuits, a lot in partnership with the state, but we will continue to do that. I mean, now that the federal administration has turned over, the target is not as obvious, but there are plenty of laws that we can seek to vindicate on behalf of the city that they can do.
Right, Michael?
Yeah, I guess I had this question for you, Georgia. It's a question related to the concept of crisis. So the law department has been there for some real moments of crisis throughout history, and many of the attorneys that are there, including you, were there for those. I feel like COVID-19 has been a crisis, but this sort of like slow rolling crisis that just goes on and on and on, but still kind of it must have similarities to other moments of crisis. I guess I was wondering if you could tell us, in what ways does the experience of the attorneys there in those prior crises, in what ways does it help to navigate this one? Or, in what ways did you find, there's really been nothing like this and we're just, in uncharted territory?
You're right that it's the crisis has been different, or it's evolved, right? Over the last 18, 19 months. Initially, it was, the New York on pause. Everybody was at home and we were dealing with shortages and price gouging, as well as protecting the health of the city. I think what makes this one different is that we had the technology available, right? After 9/11, we were all sent scattering because, the World Trade Center is a block away. But you couldn't work from home because it was 2001. Everybody in the world, in the city, did not have laptops and Wi-Fi. But now we did. I think that by the time Superstorm Sandy happened, the technology was there so that more people could work from home, but we didn't have the bandwidth. I think what we learned is we don't know what the next crisis is going to be. And I think that we can be pretty sure that in the world that we live in, that is so connected around the globe, that this is not the last pandemic we're going to see. Maybe they won't be as deadly pandemics, but we'll see viruses that come across the oceans and impact our city and our country. So we need to be prepared for that. I think we need to learn what, we have been nailing down the things that we've learned in response to this crisis to prepare us for the next, but the time will be different and there'll be hopefully more tools available to us. So I think one thing that changed over time was the availability of additional tools, and communication was easier to have across between us and City Hall and our other clients, as well as among us and the agency councils. I mean, we could get on the call with more than 100 people at agencies and do these conference calls where we went through, okay, this is what the latest executive order says, and this is how we need to implement it. Any questions? And then brainstorm answers, with the if you're not talking, please mute. But that was something that was not available to us in prior crises. And then we switched over to Zoom, and now we're on Microsoft Teams to do it more in person. So the availability of the technology has changed it, and hopefully, as time goes on, when the next crisis hits, will it be even better equipped? But it's clear that it's the communication that is key to getting us all through these moments.
Great. I have a question. When Zach Carter spoke in this forum at the beginning of the de Blasio administration, he talked about what he referred to as the gentle tension in doing justice. And that's the juxtaposition of properly defending the city in lawsuits, but also doing right by the city residents who feel wronged by the city. And he brought that up in the context, I think, of litigation in earlier years where he felt the city law department, or just the city generally, wasn't sensitive and didn't have that tension in sight. How has that evolved during the de Blasio administration? And by all accounts, it's been a very difficult number of years on so many fronts, not just in New York City. But could you comment on that a little bit?
It's funny, when I moved into this office, I found Zach's speech.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah.
So but I was struck by that, and I talk about that a lot with my students, and I teach state and local government law with Steve Lewis, as Michael is doing now, and that issue comes up, and it's really important, I think, in public sector lawyering. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Somebody that you both know, Bob Katz, was my first supervisor in general litigation when I started, and he was the one that told me from day one, winning is good. You always want to win, but that's not the most important thing. You need to take a step back and think about what the best outcome here is for everybody in the city. And that's the outcome you want to chase. So that is what Bob Katz taught me. And that has been my guiding light throughout. So yes, there's a gentle tension because, we are supposed to do. It depends on how you define the best interests of your client and who your client is. We spend a lot of time here at the law department talking about who's the client and trying to identify who the client is, because it's not always clear, and what is in the best interests of that client. And it may not be what the administration or the council or the controller wants, and trying to get everybody on the same page and understand. But we were not elected to anything. That was the other thing that Zach used to say. I wasn't elected to anything. I don't make the final call, but we can identify how decisions we make in litigation or in a real estate deal will have ramifications down the road, and get people who are newer to government to understand that and be able to make their decisions with that, against that backdrop. That is, I think, something that the law department, because we do have a lot of institutional knowledge here and history, we're in a unique position to be able to offer any administration, like, okay, yes, you can do that. Legally, you can do that, but A, B, C, D, and E may follow. And, some of that might be good, some of that might be awful. Just make your decision knowing all of that.
Great. Michael, I know you have one last question about law students and new graduates.
Yes. So, we got about a minute to go here. So what you touched on this a little bit, Georgia, what advice would you give for students like New York law students, other students coming out? What's the recipe for being a successful junior government lawyer?
Don't be afraid. and ask, if you want to work on something, ask to work on it. We're all super busy, and nobody's going to say, remember, oh, Michael likes computer security issues. Let me go give him this issue because I won't remember that. But if Michael is putting a bug in my ear, oh, if you get another case about this, can I do it? I think that is important for new attorneys to anywhere, whether it's government or the private sector. If there's something you want to work on, ask for it, because it doesn't mean that we don't think you can do it. It means that, we're busy and didn't remember that you liked it. So stretch. Try to take the stretch assignment. You may not be ready your third week on the job to handle a major class action, but you will be ready at some point soon, and just express your interest in that. And when you're ready, you'll get the case.
Terrific.
Well, terrific. That is all good. Let me get on that's all good advice. Stretch and don't be afraid. Thank you so much. It was a wonderful breakfast. I really appreciate all that you are doing. And I want to thank our Dean Anthony Crowell and Michael Pastor for a really interesting colloquy. Thank you so much. And for the people who asked questions and comments, thank you as well. Our next breakfast will be on December 3rd with District Attorney-elect Alvin Bragg. And we're really delighted to have him so early, even before he takes office, and to hear what he has to say. So I hope you'll join us on December 3rd for District Attorney-elect Alvin Bragg. Thank you so much for attending the breakfast. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you all for having